Okay.
Can you tell me what you know about your family in Armenia?
My dad, the history of my grandfather is goes back to roughly about 1870s,
Mm.
almost Lincoln's time. And my dad was born 1900, and he was born. This is both in Armenia, and they're both born in what the town is called Tormaza. Tormaza is in the outskirts of Armenia, near the border of Turkey, and it's a mountainous region. Uh, Estimated about 70 miles from Ani, which is the oldest, I guess, I don't know about the world, but it's one of the oldest cities in the world. And it goes back several thousand years. And at one time, and according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, it was one of the most populated cities, which I had trouble believing myself, but this is in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Obviously the city of Ani is completely wiped out. It's been it's a city of like built like a fortress, one layer of walls for protection, and you come back for another layer of walls, then another layer of walls, and the term a city of 1,000 churches. I mean, it's loaded down with churches. And this is in about the same uh, altitude of Tormaza. There was about 4,100 square, not square, I'm sorry, 4,100 feet elevation. So it's up in the mountains.
Mm.
And my dad and my grandfather were uh, actually, they were in the business of making swords,
Wow.
wagon wheels, and and they were well to do for their time and place. But what happened there was that the Turks kept coming into the villages, chewing off the people. I mean, it was plain harassment all the time. Uh, it was not uncommon to just well, it was not uncommon to stop a person and just harass them. And at times, if they didn't like it, they'd shoot them. And it was not, like I said, it was a random. And and what was happening about that time, a lot of the Armenians, I won't say a humongous lot, but I mean there was quite a few that actually were searching for a place to bring their families to.
Mm.
How do I put it? Sell not salvation, but a place to save their families. I'm kind of getting tongue tied with my words here, but I'll try to keep it straight. When my grandfather, that is, I'm sorry, when my grandfather decided that it was time to look for a place to save his family,
Mm.
because many families were being shot at random, and it was not uncommon. It's just hard to imagine these things, but they were happening at that time. They He went to America. His brother had already reached America,
Mm.
and as this is 1912 is when my grandfather Abadis went to the U.S., ended up in Racine, Wisconsin. When he arrived there, He his intention was to bring the family, and in doing so, he got a job. He got himself. You have to be here so many years and pass the test. And he did everything. Got his citizenship papers. He did the whole ball of wax because he was proud to be an American.
Mm.
And when he turned around and 1915 rolled around, the genocide started. And when the genocide started, my dad was 14, pushing 15, and he had four brothers. And the four brothers were actually killed by the Turks. They were shot. And my dad was left with his mother. And at 14, she passed on. And after burying her and having his brothers dead and his mother buried, he had nothing to stay there for other than waiting to get picked up by the Turks. And the genocide was on, and he's beginning to see all this slaughter going on all over the place. I mean, I don't want to give horrific examples, but they were too bad to even describe. But anyway, when all this killing was going on, people being shot, bayoneted, and whatnot, he took off with nothing more than a pistol that he had to his name and his clothes. And at 14, he was going to try to get to his dad. So here he is on a mission to and he had a loaf of bread he took with him, and he was on this trail, and while being on the trail, he came across another youngster coming in from the opposite direction.
Mm.
And this opposite, well, what happened is, to clarify the story a little more, these were all Turks up and down these trails, and they talk Turkish. And you can't say anything Armenian because you don't know. You'll just be picked off right off the bat. But here, these two coming together, two young boys, one 14, one maybe a little older, and they spot one another, and they, my dad thought at the time, he said he was tired, so he just stepped over to the side and sat on a rock, and this other youngster comes alongside of him, and he sits there, comes alongside, and he sits by him, and my dad tells him in Armenian, he says, "Hayas." What that means is, "Are you Armenian?" And the other party says, "Ayo, yes." So
Wow.
they start conversing on what's ahead. I mean, what's going on in your area? What's going on in my area? And nothing good could be said about it. And after talking a while, the other party looks at my dad and says, "I see you got a pistol." And he says, "Yeah." And the guy, and the individual, the youngster, he had a loaf of bread. And my dad says to him, "Why are you picking on my pistol?" He says, "Well," he says, "we've been sitting here talking for quite a while, but there's something I really can't tell you." He says, "I can't tell you who I am. I can't tell you what mission I'm on, but I do need a pistol to accomplish my goal." And he says, "The only thing I have in my possession is a loaf of bread." So my dad looks at him and says, my pistol for his loaf of bread. Well, he didn't think too long about it because he realized the individual was on a mission. And in those days, you trusted everybody.
Mm.
It isn't like today, somebody said something, you just take it for granted. But he was on a mission. So my dad gives him the pistol, his pistol. He takes the guy's loaf of bread, and they're both hungry naturally, and they're young kids. Young kids meaning teenagers.
Mm.
So my dad takes the loaf of bread, cuts it in half with his fist, and then he hands him half, and he takes the other half. And the individual thanked him, and he says he was sorry that he can't give him his name because he's not allowed to. He's sworn an oath that he can't do it, but he's on a mission. Anyway, it goes on. They both part company and thanking one another for one for the gun, the other for the bread, and wishing each other well. And they part their ways. And the following day, a day or so goes by, and while on the trail, the Turks pick up my dad again, and he says, "What is this? You know, what did I do wrong?" And they said, "You're part of a gang, and a gang that's going around and um, hitting the neighborhood, picking up this and picking up that, and they know you're part of the gang." He says, "I'm part of no gang." He says, "I'm from Tomarza." And he says, "I'm on my way to the opposite end of Turkey for this in the shipping zone." And they just took him to jail and literally just locked him up. And another officer walking by asked the jailer, says, "What's this young guy in jail for?" "Oh," he says, "he's an Armenian." And he says, "He'll be hung in the morning." And the officer says, "Did he say anything?" Nothing more than the fact that he's from Armenia. I mean, from Tomarza. And he said, "Well, I know Tomarza. Let me interrogate him." And so he lets him in. So my dad goes, he talks to my dad, and after talking to my dad, he says, "Oh," he says, he answered all the questions to the best of his ability. And when he got through, the officer walks out and says, "Release this guy." He says, "He's from Tomarza." He says, "And I know Tomarza." He answered all his questions right. So my dad gets out, and a breath of fresh air and a new relief on life. I mean, in other words, it's just like his life was just as extended. Tomorrow morning, he's going to be hung. So this goes on. In the meantime, his only means of food and whatnot was, as he was going along, he'd see where people needed help or some work, and he'd go in and say, "Just for food. And no, there's no pay, no nothing, just to eat something." He'd just go ahead and do some work, get something to eat, and be on his way again. And he finally got to the coast of Turkey, and now he has no money, and went in to find out about transportation or any means of getting to the U.S. So he asked them if they needed any help in the shipping end of it. It just so happened they needed a stoker.
Mm.
A stoker is an individual that shovels coal into the furnace. And in doing so, he got the job, but now he's not a passenger, but he's an employee. there's a reason I bring this out, and I'll bring it up later. So now he's on the boat, and he manages to get to the U.S. And when he gets there, he manages to get a letter off to his dad. He had the address in Racine, Wisconsin. His dad was naturally surprised to see that he was still alive, and send him the money to New York to get my dad a ticket to come to Racine, Wisconsin. Thus, my dad makes it to Racine, and of course they unite and whatnot.
Wow.
And my dad now is 21 years old, and the reason I mentioned about being a stoker and being an employee, I checked the records, and according to his citizenship papers and everything, it shows that he arrived in the U.S. in 1920 and in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say what ship. And I wasn't able to nail it down to a ship. Now, I didn't pursue it any further. I was writing, and I spent about 4 or 5 days on this, and I stopped and I proceeded on. So I never found out what ship he came in on, but I did have the facts that he came in 1920, and so I have that established. And my dad naturally gets him a job, and he's on his way to. He's staying with my dad, with my grandfather. And so my grandfather had an apartment, so they doubled up for a while. And my dad turns around and gets into photography. And then he gets a license for a barber. Oh, I have to tell you the one about the barber.
Mm.
When he was doing this barber, he passed his test and everything. He got the equipment. He went to do his first job, and the first guy he was going to give a haircut to, he came, sat down, and when my dad was going to put the apron on him, the guy was plastered drunk. He was just loaded. He wanted a full deal. Full deal meaning shave, haircut, a whole ball of wax. And my dad, he's a he was kind of a clean cut guy, and when he couldn't get past the odor, he said, "Oh," he says, he just couldn't stand the guy. So he took the apron. He walked over to the owner of the barber shop, and he says, "I'm sorry, but I can't do it." He quit his barber shop.
Oh my goodness.
He wouldn't cut hair. So anyway, he went on
Wow.
and ended up finding a job at GI Case Company, which is making tractors and so forth. And he got to be what they call a cubicle operator because his background was blacksmithing in the old country. And in the old country, I pointed out, they made swords and knives and anything metal, like I said, could be poured and molded. But he had a background in it, so naturally he got right into a position, a good paying position, because not too many people knew how to remove slack, which is the impurities off the ore, and clean it and have pure molded metal where they can pour it into molds, which is to develop like the case tractors. In other words, the molds for the motors were already set up, and all they did is pour the hot ore into the mold, and it would form itself. Of course, it cooled down a day or two, but that's what they did. It was that was his job, And from that point on, it I guess his next project was the group was wanted to build a church. So the the church that they started on, and this is from scratch. And what I'm talking about, they got the lot now, and now just not like it's hard to imagine this because nowadays you think of you got to get your plans, you got to draw this out, and in other words, you have to turn it in to the city. And back then they didn't do that. They bought the lot, and my father made the plans for the church where the way it was going to be laid out, and then he went ahead and where he got this ability and how he did it, you know, it came from within himself. But he would show the people how to put the 2x4s in the right place and line them up, and this would be the same pattern to go all the way across the building. And then the next thing, how they put the flooring on, and he put the first couple of floors in, woodwork in,
Wow.
showing the pattern, and then the other workers would go on ahead and do it. Then he'd go on ahead and do the electrical and the plumbing.
Mm.
So when they got through, uh, he went ahead and built started on an altar, and through his own craftsmanship and the church that he had seen in Tormaza, which was built in about the 1500, roughly in that area. And my dad went ahead and he was, I don't know how in the world he could remember it all, but these pictures of the lambs and the cross and how they associated and fixtures and pictures. Uh, anyway, he built an altar which still stands today, and it's getting close to about 100 years old right now.
Wow.
And matter of fact, the altar's in this book. Yeah. Well, anyway, um, so about this time, my dad runs into my aunt, who's showing him a picture of her sister in Greece. And she managed to get to Greece from Armenia in her flight, but she was in a orphanage with her other sister, two of them. And the mother was had to give them up because she could not afford, not just afford. You know, it's not like we think of afford. You live in a home and you just don't have enough money. I mean, we're talking about food. We're talking about clothing. We're talking about um, survival. So here she has four daughters, and here she has put two of them in the orphanage so they could be taken care of while she was mopping floors and whatnot, trying to survive and trying to survive the youngsters. And here, this reason I bring this up now, my aunt shows them a picture where the girls are dressed up in these here beautiful outfits. They look like Greek outfits, and beautifully hand hand done. And when this is all, when they're looking at all this, my dad says, "God, that you know, she's not bad looking, but boy, if she can do all this, I mean, what a wife that would be, you know." And his buddy, uh, that's an uncle of mine, standing over his shoulder and looking, and he says, "Hey, who's the other one?" the girl next to her. And my aunt says, well, that's my other sister. Those are, in other words, there's four of us. And she says, that's one is Bizarre and one is Vartui. Anyway, and my uncle says, you know what, Alec, you take that one, and I'll take the other one. He says, how much is this going to cost?
Oh.
And so now they have to send the boat tickets. And now another problem arises. They can't come to the U.S. They have to be married or documented or something before they can get into the U.S. So they ended up having the girls. They sent them the money and told them to fly into Cuba or take a boat to Cuba. I can't remember which of the two it was. But they get to Cuba, and my uncle and my dad both go to Cuba, meet up with the women, they get married, and they come to the U.S. And another, I guess you might say, 3-4 years goes by, and that's when Harutun, that's me, pops up. And so I'm born. So that's a new life that starts now. And this is the beginning of the autobiography portion of my life. And that was the history of my dad and my grandpa, and the rest of them were all buried there. There's not much to say about them other than we can go back a little further in history, but it's in this book. But I have a little story about my that's my grandfather's great grandfather.
Wow.
How they left him in a cave, and but that's another story. I don't think you want to get into.
You can share it if you would like.
Well, the story goes that he was over 100 years old, and the Turks at that time, even back then, this is getting back into the 1800s, they were pursuing this small group of Armenians. And what it was, they were after, what the incident was all about, I don't recall. But I do remember the story that it was told to me and my sister. At the same time, we were sitting down listening to my grandfather tell us that this group was fleeing into the mountainous areas, and the Turks were behind them. And they finally got to a point where they found a cave, and the Turks were ways behind them. And they said, let's rest here for a while. And my great uncle, or grandfather, I said uncle, they had him rest, and he was more or less starting to hold them down because he was tiring. He was over 100 years old, and he couldn't see that well. But the fatigue was beginning to get to him. Now, from what my grandfather told us, that he was very, very strong. I mean, he was an exceptionally strong man. It was not normal to be uh, that strong, being climbing mountain trails and so forth at 100. But he did. But of course, in what shape he was in, and desperate and all that. And now they left him in a cave, and he said, "You guys go on, leave me the pistol." And he says, "That's all I asked for is a pistol. I want to see how many I can take with me. I mean, I'll be by myself." So begrudgingly, they did not want to do it, but he insisted. So they left him a loaded pistol and food, and they left. And of course, that was the end of the story as far as he was concerned. The rest were fleeing for freedom, trying to get on the other, uh, get on the trail and move on. So my uncle turns around and my grandfather tells me that to this day they don't know uh, whatever happened. Did he find someone? Did he end up killing some Turks? And if they did, how many were in the cave with him? Whatever.
Wow.
It's another dead story, you know. But that's where his life ended. So they know where he was, whether it ended one way or the other. Now we're through with that. That puts us all the way back to the U.S. Now I'm just born and uh, I'm growing up about 4 or 5 years old, and now it's time for me to go to school. My mother and them are strictly, they can speak Greek, Turkish, and a little bit of Arabic, but nothing in English. And they speak Armenian. So they can speak several languages, but English was not one of them. So when I grew up in that household, that's all I knew was Armenian. And of course, if they ever were saying something they didn't want me to know, they would speak in another, like Turkish language or something, and I wouldn't understand what they were talking about. You see? But in the meantime, they too wanted to learn English, so they were starting to trying to learn a little bit of English here and there. They would practice. And time came for me to go to school. And when I went to school, my mom says, I told her, I said, these kids don't understand a word. I mean, they're all out of place. In other words, I looked at them being foreigners, it wasn't me that was out of place, it was them, you know. And she said, look, Harry, she said, you just do what they do. That's it. And you'll learn. I said, all right. So I go into the classroom. I'm supposed to do what they do. Just don't make any trouble. I'm told that. So I walk in, everybody's sitting down, teacher, kindergarten teacher is sitting there on a chair and has a book in her hand and she's reading. And she told me to sit down. I sat down. So no more than 3-4 minutes goes by and I see this one boy put his hand up. And the teacher says, yes, Johnny. And he stands up. He says, I have to go pee-pee. Huh? Go ahead, Johnny, you can go pee-pee. So he gets up and he walks. Pee-pee. Well, what's pee-pee? The kid's gone. And I'm sitting there now listening. And she's reading. And about another 3, 4, 5 minutes goes by. And next thing I know is another hand goes up. Yes, Edward. I have to go pee-pee. And then I said, okay. The instructor says, okay, Edward, you may go pee-pee. And I look, and he's got a big smile on his face. What the hell is this pee-pee? Then you walk across, then you get out, go out the door, and they're gone. So you got to go pee-pee, and they go out the door. So what is this? Well, one way to find out. I put up my hand. Yes, Harry. I said, I have to go pee-pee. I don't even know what the hell it is. Then I get up, walk over to the side, and then I get away from the kids and I start walking out the door. And when I open the door, I look all the way down to the end. It's the entrance going out, and the other goes way deep into the building. Then I figure out, well, what's this pee-pee thing, and where's everybody at? Nobody's on the aisleway or nothing. Then all of a sudden, on the far end, I see one of the boys come out of a door, and he's walking back. I'll go over there and find out. So I walk all the way over there. See the store. It's got a sign on it. I don't know what the hell it says. I just push the door open. It's got all these urinals and everything. And I said to myself, Armenian, this is Bekaran. It's a toilet for, it's a restroom. I mean, as you would think of in English. But in Armenian, and I'm thinking of in Armenian terms, you see, and you translate it to English. But I realize now I'm in it's a toilet, not the toilet, but the restroom. But, and I said, okay, so I went to the restroom, not that I had to go, but I went, and then I turned around, and that was the first words I learned in English was,
Wow.
"Inte."
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, and then the next step was, as I grew up, I was going to Armenian school and learning Armenian, and I knew all my alphabets. I mean, I Pen Chem, which is A, B, C, but it's 36 letters in the alphabet.
Wow.
So after the 36 letters, I thought I got them all memorized. And now we're learning how to write, and the teacher's showing us like the mountain, and then he's putting the words Ararat, meaning Ararat. It's like this mountain. It's just a picture, and they write on the blackboard. They write the name across it.
Wow.
So I'm getting this down pretty good now. And all of a sudden, I get a tap on my shoulder. I just bend my head a little bit like this, and I hadn't said a word. I bend my head like this, and I was waiting to hear what he's going to say. He didn't say anything. But the next thing that happened was I felt somebody grab me by my ear, twist it, and pull me out of my chair. I said, like, ouch, like, how you hurt me, for crying out loud. And I mean, this is all in Armenian, because it's an Armenian class. He dragged me all the way out to the door, into the hallway, opens up what they call a soda room, where we have towels, miscellaneous, and soda bottles, and unused soda, whatever, soda bottles. It's a soda room, I guess. Threw me in there, pulled the door, locked it, and click, locked it. And I mean, I was more hurt by being embarrassed in front of my whole class, being pulled out, and I didn't have any choice word for him because he was twisting my ear and pulling at the same time, and I knew I had to get out of there. So there was only one window, and I looked down. It was 2 stories down, and I tried the door, and I can't get out the door. I'm 7 years old. So I go over and I look at all these towels that ready to be washed or whatever. So I tie a bunch of them together, and I tied one end to a pole, made a knot out of it. I opened the window and threw all the other towels that were all tied together down 2 stories down. Grabbed a hold of it, climbed all the way down, went home. I said, that was the end of my Armenian school.
My goodness.
I said, I'm not going back then. And in all honesty, I was the one who got hurt because I missed out on my learning my Armenian. But I mean, getting educated in Armenian. Anyway, and then comes my dad and them building the church. And then when they built the church, we'd have our picnics. And in Armenian, we have it covered in here. In Armenian, the picnic grounds, what they call as a madach, Madach is in the old country where once a year the Armenian church throws a big feast and nobody pays for the food. Okay, it's given
Mm.
to uh, the needy. Okay, and how they supplement, to be able to afford this is they would auction off like big 10-gallon pots of lamb that are being, well, already barbecued, but it's in kettles and in salads and different foods, in buckets and different pastries. And then what they would do is they would put it like an auction, and the ones that could afford it would, like for instance, this is lamb. It's going to go a little more, so it's going to go like maybe a couple $100 or so, whatever. So they each and the people bid on it. And so whoever finally gets it, they don't get the lamb. What they do is they get the honor of donating the food to the group by uh, having the priest say a prayer for their either dad, mom,
Mm.
or whatever, descendant. So this is a case of each one. They have an auction on each one of these. And then all the food is laid out and everybody has a feast,
Wow.
you see. So really it's paid by about 4 or 5 people, that can afford it,
Mm.
you know. So that's how the madog is done.
Mm.
And they still practice this today in Racine, Wisconsin.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say they're the only ones, but I would have to say it would be no more than a handful of churches that would still pursue that same old country philosophy.
Mm.
Over here, when you go to a picnic or whatever from church, it's so much a plate, whether it's lamb, whatever beef, whatever they use. And but in the that was the way they did it. And what else can I tell you? Um, I can't go into all the customs. There's a lot of um, well, the custom is, well, now it's going to get into how we operated in the church.
Mm.
We had not only Armenian school, but we used to have a real, I guess you'd call it it's a bugle corps. I wanted to call it a band, but it's not. It was a bugle corps that we had, and believe it or not, in Racine, Wisconsin, it had one of the hottest bugle corps. They were something like 15, 20, and it's amazing what they could do with bugles. I'm not talking about trumpets now. I'm talking
Mm.
about bugles.
Wow.
No keys. You got what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And they would be called from city to city to participate in different parades
Mm.
because they were so good. Yeah, they were really popular. And from that point on, we came to California. And from California, met a new group of people. And my heart was still with Racine.
Mm.
I missed a little episode while I was about, I guess, 6, 7 years old. Us kids all we had, remember, we're not in the time of iPhones, telephones, radio, TV. At this point, we did not have it yet. It was, I would say, a few years later. I'm trying to think of the year. I'm having a little trouble nailing it down.
Mm.
But that's when the radio first came out. The television was about 1939. That's when it first came out. But in the meantime, what I'm trying to point out, we had not a thing to say play games with other than what games we made up. So what we play is hopscotch, marbles, hide and seek, and whatnot. And this one particular incident, I we were playing hide and seek, and hide and seek is where you go hide, and the guy's got his hands up against the post, and now he's going to come out looking for you. He comes out. Well, anyway, we're playing hide and seek. In the meantime, I see this bushes right behind my house. It's in the corner. So I ran into the bushes, and when I jumped in, and I'm trying to hide, and who's in front of me but this cute little Armenian girl. So anyway, she's giggling and laughing, and I'm laughing, like, and we're about 7, 8 years old, both. So anyway, the guy's looking around, he's going around places trying to find somebody. And then all of a sudden I was looking at her and I said, I'm going to give her a little kiss. I kissed her on the cheek, just kissed her. And I closed my eyes and I held tight and I'm waiting for the slap, And I waited and nothing happened. I opened my eyes and she's got a big smile on her face. And I said, oh my gosh. So anyway, the game was over. That was my first kiss there, behind a tree. And funny thing is, she wrote me. That's another story. I ran into her 50 years later.
Wow.
Don't you remember me? You were the first boy who ever kissed me. Oh, but I said it wasn't a real kiss. That was, like a how do you do kiss. It's a little different.
Yeah.
But anyway, and that's another story. But that was getting back to. Let's leave all this, and we made the trip to Wisconsin. And in the process of going up 66, we had to make a pit stop, and we're near not in California, but we were getting to a mountainous area. And off the side of the road there, we got out, and I walked to the side, and it was gravel all over, and it was kind of like a rest period for my dad, just to stretch our legs and so forth. So I walked past the bushes and so forth, and of all things, I come across a grave, and it was like little pebbles with an old wooden cross with the inscription, Billy the Kid. And I said, I'll be darned. Billy the Kid. I mean, I'd heard of him. I mean, even back then, but I said, is it really Billy the Kid or what, So it's something I always remembered. Billy the Kid's grave was right off the side of the road. You wouldn't believe it. But no signs, no nothing. I guess it's kind of like hidden. So we got to California, and we started. My dad. We went through our hard times there. To put it bluntly, I couldn't make it any blunter, I guess. My dad finds a house. I won't go into detail. We stayed in a motel for almost 3, 4 months, and so I missed school all this time. But I went ahead, and my dad finds a place finally in Fresno, and for about 3,500 or something like that, he finds his house, and not a stitch of furniture in it. We walk in, the house is empty, not a chair, not a table, not a bed. I mean, the refrigerator, empty, empty, empty. So my dad says, okay, we pulled the blanket out of the car and so forth. We're laying on the floor. So for a week or so, we managed to stay. We got through, but while he was working, we had to wait a week or so to get his paycheck. Once he got his paycheck, first thing he did is get some bunks for all of us, so we had a place to finally
Wow.
sleep. And I got a job. I was hitting 11 years old, and there was an opening for the Fresno Bee. You had to be 12.
Mm.
Well, I was a pretty good sized kid, so guy asked me,
Wow.
"How old are you?" I said, 12. I had to be 12 to get the job,
Mm.
I said, "Oh, okay." So they gave me a bike and they put me in the,
Mm.
of all places, and I didn't notice at the time, but as a young kid, they were taking advantage of me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But they gave me the district of, well, not the district, but the location of LMNOP streets,
Mm.
all around Holy Trinity.
Oh.
Got me? So, and they gave me a hundred, and at that time, I had 130, 35, something like that, people on my route.
Mm.
So I got my dad, I don't know how we got it, but scrounged up a bicycle, and they gave me the flaps for it to put the newspapers in. We used to box fold them, and then I'd go out and I'd throw the papers on the homes, each one. And being it was all Armenians, and I was Armenian, I had to collect the money at the time.
Mm.
It's not like today where you pay for it by mail and all. The b-boy would go knocking on the door the end of the month to collect the money. So I ran into Professor Kalfayan. Matter of fact, he was just one door over from us here.
Wow.
And he was the type of individual, when he found out I was Armenian, I could not get by him. I'd be held up there for a good hour at least. At least. I won't go into all the episodes of what we did, all this, because he was a musician and he had an old wooden organ. Yeah, it's a wooden, I mean, no electricity. You pumped it by foot and it's air blown. And boom, boom, boom. I mean, just like Boris Karloff.
Mm.
And he found out I played the violin, and he sat there and he was head of the choir here at Holy Trinity.
Mm.
And we'd play, and he made me play. Let me put it that way. He found out I played the violin, and now here I am stuck playing the violin during my B route. I can't believe it. And the clientele, all being Armenians, knew my predicament. They said, "So he's holding you up again, huh?" You know what I mean? Like, we know where you are. Like, can you get it a little faster? Like, we like to get the news as soon as we can. Well, I said I try, but I said it's sometimes it's just hard getting away from us. Yeah, we know. So that's how I met Professor Kalfayan, and I used to run this whole district on the other side of Ventura and all the way down to Los Angeles here.
Oh my goodness.
And then I went ahead and I guess you might say, it wasn't long after that. I guess I got into Longfellow. It's a junior high school. There was quite a few Armenians at the point. There were some that came from Emerson and some from Jefferson grammar schools.
Mm.
And we both got to meet one another at Longfellow. So it was like one big tribe getting together. And being we were, believe it or not, we used to call them gangs back then. We used to be a gang of us from Longfellow. I mean, from Jefferson, and the gang from Emerson. And when the two gangs got together, instead of rebelling or fighting or anything like that, we actually united,
Mm.
like into a bigger group, because we're all Armenians. You got what I'm saying?
Mm.
We had the same thing in common, you see. And so we would help one another. And so it got to be quite a little group. I can go into names of people that are, but it's not necessary. And so we grew up that way and got through junior high school, went to Roosevelt. And by the time I got out of Roosevelt, I'm going to bypass a lot of things because we got into athletics and ran into the West Coast relays and stuff like this, all in junior high school. And then when I got to when I got out of I forgot, when I got to grammar school, you can laugh at this one. I was just getting out of the 6th grade when I was going to Longfellow. I pestered my dad and pestered my mom about I want to go back to Wisconsin. I have all my friends are in Wisconsin, you know. And you know, when I got out for grammar school, which was the 6th grade, I had to be about 12 years old. My dad said, "You really want to go? I'm gonna." Now he's putting me on.
Huh.
You really want to go? I'm going to put you on the train and send you. What do you think? Hey, Mom, get my clothes ready. You know. And he said, "You really want to go?" He's waiting for me to back down.
Yeah.
And then my mom's telling him, "You're not taking it." You know, I could get the sense that he's not going to take him. Like he's going to back out. You know. So I said, "Let's go." So I got my suitcase. I don't even know what's in it, but my mom put something in there. So I grabbed my suitcase and I'm walking with my dad. "You really want to go, huh?" I asked Dad. I said, "I want to go." And we're walking. It's about 5 blocks to the Santa Fe Railroad. So we get to the railroad station. He had the tickets. Don't ask me how he had done this. But he'd gone up, picked up the ticket. He said, "See, this is the ticket. Now that's for the train. Are you going to go?" He's waiting for me to say, "No, I'm not going to go." So anyway, I turned around and say, "Okay, um, I'm going to go on. I'm going. No two ways about it. The train is coming now." And so we walk up to the door. "You still going to go?" And I argued that, "No, you're not going to talk me out of it, Pop." I said, "I'm going." And so the train stopped. I went over and I jumped on the train.
Wow.
And then and I'm 12 years old now. And my dad says, all right, the fun is over. Let's you know, it's time to get off the high horse and let's go home." "Bye, Dad." Woof, woof, the train starts going. You know, and I'm waving to him, and he's opening his mouth like this, like, you know, like, this guy's going. He's 12 years old. He's heading for the East Coast by himself, you know. So off I went, and then anyway, cut it long. I would cut a lot of corners here, but I went back east, got my grandfather. He had a ball while I was over there, and I brought him back to Fresno, and then from that point, a new adventure came. And my dad bought a farm and put me and my grandfather on the farm, and now we were farming 40 acres, watermelons, cantaloupes, uh, cotton. Um, I went through all that and had developing a little dairy and doing all this as a 15-year-old, you know. And anyway, that's just me and my grandfather on the farm. And then, I don't know how fast I can go. So anyway, my grandfather and I had a great time. I mean, I played cards with him. We played Carsoon, which is 40. But anyway, I'm trying to think here. What's the next important step? Um, well, I get thrown into the service,
Mm.
and the time comes for me to go into service. I go ahead, and I get shipped off to Okinawa, and some crazy circumstances all come up. I don't have enough time to explain it all, but I get it. I get thrown into. I was picked for U.S. Army intelligence in Okinawa, so I was there for until I was time to come home. So I was in the Army with S2. This is what my position was, Army intelligence. And then when I got back, met my wife to be
Mm.
at a dance in um, Visalia, which is a triple X dance, and we ended up having 3 daughters. I'm trying to going faster here.
Mm.
So after having 3 daughters, I ended up learning. Let me see. I had automotive, and I was going to get into open a shop up for automatic transmissions at
Mm.
the time, but my wife talked me into going back to school, learning electronics. So I went ahead and went back. So now I had an electronics background, automotive background, and I got a job with Sears, which gave me the TV department, did a high tech center dealing with computers and whatnot. And then I had the mechanical shop and a fleet of trucks. And that's what I made a career out of. And then in the evening times, I would teach electronics at the Professional
Wow.
Technical College from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 5 nights a week. And then after about 8, 9 years, brought my family, was having the family come up, and I quit my teaching job to go back to school.
Mm.
So I was carrying 9 units and working full time, and I got my degree.
Mm.
Just what I needed was my last 2 years. I already had my AA, so now I was getting my Bachelor of Arts. And then there's a story behind that. There's a lot of stories that happened in between that time I went into school and anyway, uh, I guess you might say I get uh, trying to think about more important things that were developed. Well, as a family, we took a lot of trips. We went to Victoria,
Mm.
Canada, Vancouver. Um, anyway, the family life was something else.
Can you tell me what being Armenian means to you and how you've been able to preserve that?
I'm proud of my heritage and proud of what the Armenians stand for. The Armenians stand for Christianity. If you don't believe in Christianity, I mean, to me, this is what it's all about. And the Armenians being the first Christian nation in the world, which the world doesn't really know, but it's written, documented, and yet if it comes right out, people are not aware of it, and it's just that Armenians don't advertise. It's something you don't see us saying that our poor are in other words, people are hungry or this and that. We take care of our own the best we can, you know, and um, and I'm proud of it. And I can't put it any other way. Um, the Lord gave us a challenge, and the Armenians have accepted it. The Armenian king invited Christ to Armenia before his demise, and he refused. Instead, he sent his Bartholomew and his disciples to Armenia, telling the Armenian king, "No, thank you, but I have a mission." And this is what it's all about, Christianity, you know. And that's why they're more of a humble people, you know, and it's hard for people to understand that. So we may sound a little different. That's only because we are humble, you know. But you come right down to it, uh, aggressive in getting the job done. You know, you put a couple Armenians doing something, they'll do it.